My name is James Malone. I'm the president of the Point Pleasant, New Jersey Historical Society. The Society is very pleased to be able to present to you a variety of old films that we've obtained, edited, and transferred to video. These films offer us a rare look into the history of the Point Pleasant area, including the Morro Castle disaster and the digging of the Manasquan Inlet. We'll open and close our video with two silent films. The first one was shot in Point Pleasant, the latter in Manalocan. Our first film takes place in the year 1926. In that year, a filmmaker produced a two-reeler called Vacation Time in Beautiful Point Pleasant. Unfortunately, the first reel seems to have been lost forever, but we found the second, restored it before it disintegrated. A reoccurring theme in this film seems to be the burying of a key in the sand. For what reason, we don't know. But we invite you to sit back and help us to try and unlock this mystery.
The modern Manasquan Inlet is a stable, safe waterway navigated by thousands of craft on a summer weekend. Jetties on both sides prevent it from shifting along the coastline. Periodic dredging keeps it deep. This is not its natural state. Inlets naturally move, shoal, close, and reopen. This 1879 Army Corps of Engineers map shows the Manasquan Inlet making a sharp, hooking northward turn for about 1,000 feet. Above that, the map shows that 11 years before, in 1868, the inlet had been a couple thousand yards north of that, along the Manasquan beach. In this map, the Corps of Engineers is proposing to straighten out the inlet and stabilize it at what became its current modern location. That project did not take place until 1931. It was forced upon the people by the inlet's disastrous and total closing. A closing so total you could walk from Point Pleasant Beach to Manasquan without getting your feet wet. This aerial photo, looking south, shows the inlet completely closed with sand. The construction of modern jetties, the first part of the reopening project, had just been finished when this photo was taken by National Geographic magazine, but the removal of the sand had not yet begun. The reopening involved a massive project, which was documented on this 16-millimeter film by one of Point Pleasant Beach's most prominent citizens.
My name is Arthur Johnson. I was born here in Point Pleasant Beach in 1903, so I've seen a lot of changes, including this inlet before it was closed and after it was closed and while they're opening it.
Arthur Johnson was the proprietor of Point Pleasant Hardware and a founder of the community's first telephone company, among his many other accomplishments. He made these comments on his film in 1986. It was shot over a period of a full year.
Now, this film shows the opening of the Manasquan Inlet. The work was started in the summer of 1931. This film, as you can see, is somewhat faded. It's over 50 years old. It's the home movies.
The building of piers out to the ocean on each side of the inlet was the first project. Bulkheads were built for the rocks to be dropped into. Rocks were brought out on the piers, mostly two at a time, for construction of those jetties, which would prevent the inlet from ever shifting again. Those rocks came from the construction of the 2nd Avenue subway in Manhattan. They were shipped by rail on flat cars to Seagirt and then transported by trucks to the construction site. This is the Manasquan side. The camera moves across what will eventually be an inlet again, but is now just sand. Note the wooden construction pier crossing the inlet north to south. The Point Pleasant side is almost entirely empty. Coming up, the first of several glances of the old Inlet Pavilion. Built in 1903, it lasted until 1947. A scoop dredge finally begins taking up the solid sand that blocked the inlet. The project that began in the summer of 1930 and was to take a year before it was completely finished reached its most dramatic turning point on a snowy February 10, 1931, when the necessary scoops of sand were finally taken and the waters of the Manasquan River and the Atlantic Ocean once again merged. Despite the weather, a large crowd was on hand to cheer the waters merging. On hand for the opening were Bill Stanford, editor of the Ocean County Leader, Mayors Bill Jakes and Lloyd Riddle of Point Pleasant Beach and Manasquan, and Philadelphia Judge V.F. Gable of the Manasquan River Protective Association, which was responsible for pressuring the government to put up the money for the project. While the waters now meet, they are hardly navigable yet. Looking west here, this temporary bridge spanned the inlet. Boulders were trucked over it. Looking inland on the Manasquan side, the bulkhead is the old wooden Manasquan bulkhead built in 1882, parts of which were in use into the early 1980s. Coming up, another view of the old Inlet Pavilion in 1931. There's not another building in the inlet area, not even the Coast Guard station, which was on this space about 5 years later. By contrast, the Manasquan side is built up. This suction dredge operated from the west side of the inlet. It came all the way through the river and had to dredge its way almost from the railroad bridge because of the shoaling along the way. Presumably, it had to be brought in through the Barnegat Inlet, up the bay, and through the canal, because Manasquan Inlet was not yet navigable. The spoils were pumped to Gull Island and to the Manasquan beachfront. The sign says Jesse A. Howland. He was the Seabright contractor who built the jetties. The Hill Dredging Company moved the sand. Well, what happened to cause the solid closing of the Manasquan Inlet, much tighter than ever before in recorded history? Arthur Johnson explains.
What happened, the inlet had always been opening and closing, so that there wasn't much of an inlet the last few years, but then they put the canal through from the head of Barnegat Bay, and from then on, any surplus water, as high water in the river, went down the bay instead of going out to break through to the ocean. So it built up, as I said, about 1/8 of a mile of solid sand until they did this work.
The Point Pleasant Canal opened in February of 1926. By the spring of that year, the inlet was closed. All kinds of efforts were made to reopen it. In August, firemen and the National Guard used high-pressure hoses and managed to open a narrow channel. But it was a losing battle. The inlet was closed completely, and Point Pleasant, Manasquan, and Brielle were out of business as ports in 1928 and 1929. Final cost for the inlet opening, $600,000. That was to build the jetties and to remove the sand, opening Manasquan Inlet. The impetus came from the Manasquan River Improvement Association. Point Pleasant Beach, Point Pleasant, Manasquan, Brielle, and Monmouth and Ocean counties each contributed $25,000. The state matched that $150,000, and the federal government matched the $300,000 total. The project was completed on time and on budget. Although dredging continued for months to come, the inlet was navigable again. People were ready to celebrate with a major water parade, which will be the subject of our next film. August 29, 1931 was a day of celebration. It began here at the Bay Head Yacht Club, where, according to a front-page article in the Asbury Park Press, a parade of hundreds of boats was long planned to celebrate the reopening of the Manasquan Inlet. The parade route was north through the Manasquan Bay Head Canal, which is now known as the Point Pleasant Canal, triumphantly through the newly reopened inlet, and then back to the Yacht Club. The normally empty upper Barnegat Bay of the early 1930s was as packed that day as it is on a summer weekend in the 1990s. Arthur Johnson captured the scene on film.
This was really quite an occasion. All these boats together, they must have come all the way from Tom's River and Seaside Park to get in the parade.
The Coast Guard helped coordinate the event from the docks of the Yacht Club here. The shed in the background is the Morton Johnson Boat Works. Many dignitaries participated. Among them here, General Lytle Brown, Chief of the Army Corps of Engineers, U.S. Senator Hamilton F. Kane, New Jersey Secretary of State Thomas A. Mathis, and Motor Vehicle Commissioner Harold G. Hoffman. Governor Morgan F. Larson, seen here, was the special guest. The boats traveled in 3 divisions. 4 flagships carried federal, state, county, and local officials. Spectators lined the sides of the canal. This is the first Loveland Town Bridge. It was notable for being an off-center swing bridge. The left side of the swing was much larger than the right side. It was built in 1929, about 3 years after the canal was opened. The current Loveland Town Bridge replaced the original in 1972. There were no bulkheads along the canal in the early days. As the sides eroded and the waterway shoaled, the Army Corps of Engineers added them over a period of 20 years or more. This is the site of the boat basin currently called the Point Pleasant Yachting and Fishing Club. The basement was built some years after the canal was constructed. The original Route 88, or Lakewood Road Bridge. It was built while the canal was still a dry ditch as part of the original project. The current Veterans Memorial Lift Bridge replaced the original drawbridge in 1986. Approaching the Manasquan River now. Note there are no houses on the Brielle side directly ahead in 1931. Heading down the river toward the inlet, we see the Route 35 bridge as it looked in 1931. This was built in 1925, the third bridge in that general location. The bridge collapsed in 1946 and was replaced with the current draw. The railroad bridge remains essentially unchanged. The flotilla finally reaches the newly navigable inlet and, cheered by hundreds of spectators, makes its way into the Atlantic. On the return trip, we see another problem with the old Route 35 bridge. It had only 10 feet of clearance for marine traffic, causing constant motoring headaches. With the parade participants back in the Manasquan River heading home, let's now take a couple of minutes to study the craft in our area in the early 1930s. Back outside the Bayhead Yacht Club, the water parade ends with a cannon salute. In the pre-dawn hours of September 8, 1934, the luxury passenger ship Morro Castle was en route from Havana to New York. The captain had died under mysterious circumstances during the voyage. The seas were heavy with a nor'easter off the Jersey coast. A fire, later believed to be arson, was discovered. And by the time the Morro Castle was off Seagirt, it was a ball of fire visible from shore. The tragedy made international headlines. When the final tally was in, 133 of the 435 aboard had perished. The heroes of this story are the local mariners who formed an armada of rescue boats, braving the strong seas to find survivors and bodies. Manasquan Inlet was a main base of the operations. Point Pleasant Beach resident Arthur Johnson participated in the rescue, and he took these movies. Many of the survivors, who managed to either swim to safety or to get to the too few lifeboats, came ashore here in Seagirt. The fierce nor'easter that spread the flames in the ship continued during the rescue effort. Captain James Bogan of Brielle and his crew of the Paramount rescued many. He described the efforts in these words: "It was a ticklish business, running the boat close enough to a man or woman or a group of 3 or 4 in that rough water without bumping one of them, and yet getting close enough for a crewman to throw a line with certainty, or even, in the case of the weaker swimmers, to reach out and seize them." The Morro Castle's lifeboats were sometimes overcrowded, but some came ashore with only a few survivors. It was alleged that many crew members left in lifeboats, abandoning the passengers. This is the Broadway Bridge in Point Pleasant Beach, looking south toward Lake Louise. A great many survivors and bodies were brought here. The Point Pleasant First Aid Squad took a leadership role. This is the current Ken's Landing. In the background, the SS Club Royale, a large houseboat moored where the Coast Guard dock is now. In 1934, the same year this film was taken, that 100 by 40-foot boat became part of a statewide scandal involving allegations of gambling in its 2 ballrooms. The Coast Guard tried to tow the Morro Castle into New York Harbor, but she broke loose and drifted, still ablaze, to Asbury Park, narrowly missing Convention Hall. She became a tourist attraction, drawing hundreds of thousands of people to the resort during the post-summer season. In the inquiry that followed the disaster, many safety violations were uncovered. There had been no emergency training for the crew and no lifeboat drills. Acting Captain William Worms and his chief engineer and a cruise line vice president were convicted of willful neglect. The officers were sentenced to prison, but their convictions were overturned on appeal. As for the cause of the fire, the ship had been transporting arms to Havana for use by the Cuban dictatorship. There was much speculation that communists trying to overthrow the Cuban government had started the fire, but no evidence was found. The Morro Castle's chief radio operator, George White Rogers, was at first hailed as a hero for his efforts to help the passengers. Later he became, and remains to this day, the chief arson suspect. Rogers had a past criminal record and a history of mental instability, and he was to end his life in prison convicted of murder charges years later, unrelated to this disaster. The Morro Castle was eventually towed away and used for scrap metal.
For the memory of things I can't forget, journeys on a jet, our wondrous week in Martinique and Vegas and roulette. How lucky I was. Thanks for the memory of summer by the sea, dawn in Waikiki. We had a pad in London, but we didn't stop for tea. How cozy it was. Now since our breakup, I wake up alone on a gray morning after. I long for the sound of your laughter. And then I see the laughs on me, but thanks for the memory of every touch of thrill. I've been through the mill, I've lived a lot and learned a lot. You love me not, and still I miss you so much. Thanks for the memory of how we used to jog, even in a fog. That barbecue in Malibu, away from all the smog. How rainy it was. Thanks for the memory of letters I destroyed, books that we enjoyed. Tonight, the way things look, I need a book by Sigmund Freud. How brainy he was. Gone are those evenings on Broadway. Together we go for a great show. But now I begin with a late show, and wish that you were watching too. I know it's a fallacy that grown men never cry. Baby, that's a lie. We had our bed of roses, but forgot that roses die. And thank you so much. a job, even in a fog. That barbecue in Malibu, away from all the smog. How rainy it was. Thanks for the memory of letters I destroyed, books that we enjoyed. Tonight, the way things look, I need a book by Sigmund Freud. How brave he was. Gone are those evenings on Broadway. Together we go for a great show. But now I begin with a late show and wish that you were watching too. I know it's a fallacy that grown men never cry. Baby, that's a lie. We had our bed of roses, but forgot that roses die. And thank you so